At dinner, my nephew looked straight at my 7-year-old son and said, "Only grandma's real grandkids get to eat first." No one said a word. My mom even laughed. I just grabbed my son's hand, stood up from the table, and walked out. Later, my dad texted me, "You can start paying rent now." I didn't even think twice before replying, "Then you can start paying yours too." And just like that, the family group chat exploded. At dinner, my nephew looked straight at my 7-year-old son and said something that made my stomach twist. He pointed at my boy's feet and muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, that his shoes looked stupid. My son was wearing his favorite Lightning McQueen Crocs, bright red, worn out from too many playground adventures. He loved them because they made him feel fast, like a little racer. But my nephew's face twisted with envy the moment he saw them. He didn't have a pair, and I could tell that tiny spark of jealousy was about to grow into something mean. A few minutes later, when the food was served, he leaned toward my son again and said, "Only grandma's real grandkids get to eat first." The table went quiet. No one said a word. My mom actually laughed. It hit me like a slap. I could feel my son shrink beside me, his hand tightening around mine, his eyes darting down to his Crocs. That was the moment I knew we didn't belong there. Not really. So I stood up. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my son's hand and walked out of that house. The night air felt cold, but at least it was honest. My son asked if he did something wrong. I told him no, that sometimes people say hurtful things when they're jealous or confused. But deep down, I felt something break inside me. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. His message was short. "You can start paying rent now." I didn't even hesitate before replying, "Then you can start paying yours too." And just like that, the family group chat exploded. Everyone had something to say. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, aunts pretending to stay neutral, my mom claiming I had overreacted, but none of them cared that my son was humiliated right in front of them. They just wanted to keep pretending everything was fine. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through the messages. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I wasn't sure what hurt more, what my family said, or how little they cared. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner was only the beginning. What came next would tear open every secret, every quiet resentment, every lie that had been holding my family together. The next morning, I woke up to a wall of missed calls from my mom. She'd left 3 voicemails, all variations of the same thing, that I embarrassed the family, that I should have handled it privately, and that my dad didn't mean the rent text. But I didn't call her back. I just stared at the screen, numb. My son came into the room dragging his little Lightning McQueen Crocs on the carpet. He asked if we could go back to Grandma's next weekend, maybe when his cousin was in a better mood. I forced a smile and said we'd see. He didn't need to know that I had no plans of ever setting foot in that house again. By noon, my brother called. He didn't ask how I was. He just said Mom was really upset and that I needed to apologize. I asked him if he even heard what his son said at dinner. He sighed and told me kids say stupid things all the time, that I was too sensitive. Too sensitive. That phrase stung more than I expected. I'd heard it my entire life. Every time I cried, every time I tried to stand up for myself, every time someone in that family made me feel like an outsider. That afternoon, my dad texted again. This time it was a photo. My old room, the one I'd stayed in with my son, completely emptied out. My childhood posters gone, the shelves bare. His message said, "We're turning it into a guest room. You'll get your stuff next week." I felt my throat close up. It wasn't about the room. It was about what it meant. For years, I'd been pretending we were still a family, even though my mom had never accepted my son as her grandchild. Not fully. She used to call him your boy, instead of using his name. I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't always loud, but now I could see the truth. That night, while scrolling through the family chat, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. My mom had sent a picture of my nephew to everyone, him wearing brand new Lightning McQueen Crocs. The caption read, "Now he's got the real deal. Grandma always delivers." The comments were full of heart emojis and "aw, so cute" messages. Not one person mentioned my son. It wasn't about shoes. It was about the fact that they wanted to erase us quietly, like we never belonged. I turned off my phone and cried into my pillow so my son wouldn't hear. But something in me shifted that night. For the first time in years, I stopped trying to be accepted. And instead, I started thinking about how to protect my son, not just from their cruelty, but from the belief that we needed their approval to be enough. Because deep down, I knew there was a reason my mom drew that line. The words "real grandkids" weren't random. They meant something. And soon, I was about to find out exactly what. A few days passed before I finally picked up when my mom called again. Her voice was soft, too soft. The kind of tone she used when she wanted something, not when she was sorry. She said we needed to talk like adults. I almost laughed at that. Adults don't let a child humiliate another and then call it a misunderstanding. Still, I agreed to meet. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I just wanted her to admit what she did. We met at her favorite cafe, the same one where she used to take me after dance class when I was little. I sat across from her, staring at the same table we used to share hot chocolate on. But that warmth was gone now. She didn't waste time. She said she didn't like the way I made a scene, that my leaving dinner hurt the family's image. I asked her straight out why she laughed when my nephew called my son not a real grandkid. She looked away, stirring her coffee like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Then she said something that made the room feel smaller. He's not, Emily. I froze. My hands went cold. She said she didn't mean it in a bad way, that she just didn't feel connected to him. Because, according to her, blood matters. That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. My son's father, Tyler, wasn't the man my parents wanted for me. They made it clear from the start. He came from a working-class family, no college degree, no fancy job. When I got pregnant, my parents stopped speaking to me for almost a year. But I thought things had changed when my dad finally invited me back for Sunday dinners. I thought time healed something. Turns out, it didn't. It only made their resentment quieter and deeper. I told my mom she didn't deserve to call herself a grandmother. Her face went blank. She said I was being dramatic, that it's not like I ever said it to his face. That made it worse. Because she'd just done it through silence, through little smirks, through laughing when someone else did the dirty work for her. I stood up, my hands shaking. People were staring. I didn't care. She tried to grab my wrist as I walked past her, whispering that I shouldn't ruin things more than they already are. But the truth was, things were already ruined. That night, I told Tyler everything. He listened quietly, his jaw tight, eyes dark. Then he said something that scared me. He told me my mom had called him a few weeks before the dinner, asking if he'd ever taken a DNA test, just to be sure. I couldn't believe it. She actually went behind my back, trying to dig for proof my son didn't belong. I felt sick. Tyler said he didn't tell me because he didn't want to start another war. But now, it all made sense. The looks, the laughter, the real grandkids comment. It wasn't just cruelty. It was doubt. And deep down, I could feel that doubt spreading through the family like poison. Because if my mother was asking those kinds of questions, she wasn't doing it alone. Someone else must have pushed her to it. And I had a strong feeling I knew exactly who. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what Tyler said. My mom would never have come up with the DNA idea on her own. She might be cruel, but she's not clever about it. Someone had to plant that seed. I didn't have to think long. There was only one person who'd benefit from making me look like an outsider. My brother, Jason. He was always the golden child, the firstborn. The one who never disappointed. When I got pregnant young, he became the pride of the family. Everything he did was perfect. The job, the house, the wife, the perfect little boy who just happened to call my son not real. It was like Jason raised his son to believe the same things our parents did. I decided to confront him. He answered the door with that fake smile that always made me want to scream. His wife hovered in the background, pretending to clean, but I knew she was listening. I told him about the DNA test, that Mom had mentioned it to Tyler. He didn't even look surprised. He just shrugged and said maybe it was a good idea, that it would clear things up once and for all. Clear what up? That my son, the boy who looked exactly like his father, wasn't worthy of being part of this family? I asked him if he told Mom to bring it up. He didn't answer, just looked at me with that same calm, condescending expression. That silence said enough. I felt my chest tighten. He'd always been jealous of how close I used to be with Dad. Back when I still lived at home, Dad would ask me for help with the bills, the paperwork, the small stuff Jason never cared about. But after I got pregnant, Dad cut me off and turned all that attention toward Jason. It was like I'd been erased. And he made sure I stayed that way. Now I realized this was never about a DNA test. It was about power, about control, about making sure the perfect son stayed perfect. Before I left, Jason said something that burned in my chest long after I got home. He told me not to drag the family name through the mud. That phrase, the family name, almost made me laugh. What name? The one they only used when it suited them? When I got home, Tyler was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and said I should check Facebook. My stomach dropped. There it was, my mom's latest post. A family photo from last weekend's dinner. Everyone smiling around the table. Everyone except me and my son, who had been cropped out completely. You could still see the edge of his little red Crocs in the corner, and the caption read, "Family, always together, no matter what." I don't know what hurt more, the picture itself or how many people liked it. That night, I deleted myself from the family group chat, then I blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Jason, every single one of them. I told Tyler I was done trying to prove we belonged. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully believe me. He'd seen me forgive them too many times before. Still, something inside me had changed. This time, it wasn't sadness that kept me awake. It was anger, because I'd spent my whole life being quiet to keep the peace. And now, I realized peace was just another word they used for control. But the moment I thought things couldn't get worse, I got an envelope in the mail the next morning. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. And at the top, in bold letters, it said, "Paternity test results." I just stared at that envelope for a long time. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. Tyler asked what it was, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt dry. When I finally opened it, I expected something stupid. Maybe a cruel prank from Jason or Mom trying to prove a point. But it wasn't about my son. The name at the top wasn't his. It was mine. Emily Carter. Paternity test results. I froze. For a few seconds, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. Then I saw the names listed below. My mom, my dad, and a third name that I didn't recognize. According to the paper, the man who raised me was not my biological father. I just sat there, staring at the words until they blurred. Tyler took the paper from my hands and read it too. He looked at me with wide eyes, like he didn't know what to say. And honestly, neither did I. Everything inside me went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before you break. It made sense now. Every cold stare. Every time my dad treated me like a guest instead of a daughter. Every subtle difference in the way he talked to Jason versus me. I used to think he just didn't like my choices. But deep down, he must have known I wasn't his. And maybe my mom did everything she could to hide that truth, until she started projecting her own shame onto my son. Because if I wasn't real, then maybe, in her twisted logic, neither was he. Tyler kept asking who could have sent it. I didn't know. The envelope had no address, no handwriting I recognized, but it was obvious someone wanted me to see it. Someone who knew it would destroy whatever was left of my relationship with my family. I thought about Jason. About how calm he'd been when I confronted him. Too calm. He must have known. Maybe he even sent it himself. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just showed up. My mom opened the door and froze when she saw me. I didn't even step inside. I just held up the paper and asked if it was true. For a second, she didn't say anything. Her face went pale, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. Then she whispered, "Who sent you that?" Not, "It's not true." Not, "Where did you get it?" Just, "Who sent you that?" I felt something crack open inside me. I told her I didn't care who my father was, but I needed to know why she'd lied my entire life. She said she did it to protect me. That my real father wasn't the kind of man I should ever meet. But I could tell from her eyes that wasn't the full truth. Before I could say another word, my dad came to the door behind her. He looked at me, saw the paper in my hand, and turned around without saying a thing. That was it. No denial, no explanation, just silence. When I got back in the car, my hands were trembling so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. My son was in the back seat, playing with his little red Crocs, humming the car's theme song softly to himself, and I thought, this is where the cycle ends. Whatever secret they've been hiding, whatever shame they tried to bury in me, it stops here. But later that night, I got a message from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You deserve to know who he is." And below that, an address. I stared at the message for almost an hour. The address looked familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. It wasn't near my parents' house. It wasn't anyone I knew. Tyler told me to ignore it, said it was probably Jason trying to stir things up again. But something about that message felt different. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't mocking, it felt personal. I copied the address into Google Maps. My heart stopped when I saw the location. It was only 15 minutes away, on the same street where my dad's old co-worker, Mark Ellis, used to live. Mark had worked with my dad for years when I was a kid. I remembered him coming over for barbecues, birthdays, holidays. He always brought gifts. Small ones, thoughtful ones, especially for me. Back then, I thought he was just being kind. Now, I wasn't so sure. I told Tyler I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. He didn't like it, but he came with me anyway. The house looked exactly the same as I remembered. White porch, blue shutters, the same wind chime by the door. My hands were sweating when I knocked. An older man opened the door. His hair was gray now, but his eyes, they looked like mine. He froze when he saw me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said my name. Emily, in a tone that made my stomach twist. I asked him if we could talk inside. He nodded slowly and led us to the kitchen. The silence between us was heavy. I could hear the clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, every small sound louder than it should have been. I placed the folded paper on the table. He didn't even need to look at it. He just sighed and said, "Your mother swore she'd never tell you." That was all it took. I knew. He said they'd had an affair years ago, before Jason was born. He claimed it was short, and that he'd wanted to end it, but my mom found out she was pregnant. My dad agreed to raise me as his own to protect the family's image. Mark said he stayed away because that's what she asked of him. But every time he saw me at one of those barbecues, he felt the guilt all over again. I just sat there, numb. Everything I thought I knew about my childhood, gone. I asked him if my dad ever knew for sure. He nodded. Said my dad confronted him once, years later, but stayed married for appearances. That's when it hit me. The bitterness, the distance, the way my dad looked at me like I reminded him of something he hated. It wasn't my choices. It was me. Mark said he sent the DNA results because he couldn't keep the secret anymore. He thought I deserved to know the truth before it died with them. When I stood up to leave, he asked if I could ever forgive him. I didn't answer. I just told him I needed time. The drive home was quiet. Tyler didn't say a word. I could tell he was trying to be supportive, but he didn't know how to comfort me, not when I didn't even know who I was anymore. That night, after I tucked my son into bed, I sat in the dark and stared at my phone. Messages from my mom kept coming in, asking what I'd done, begging me not to make things worse, but it was already worse. And now, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. If my mom had lied about something this big for so long, what else had she hidden? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. My mom, my dad, Mark, 3 people who'd built my entire childhood on a lie. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was done waiting for my mom to tell me the truth. I was going to make her say it. I called her, but she didn't answer. I tried again, and again, until she finally picked up. Her voice sounded small. She said she was too tired for another fight, but this wasn't a fight anymore. It was survival. I told her I'd already talked to Mark. There was a long silence. Then she started crying quietly, like someone who'd been waiting for this moment for years. She asked if I hated her. I said I didn't even know who she was anymore. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Emily, there's more you don't know." My heart sank. I thought she meant another secret about me, but it wasn't. It was about my son. She said she hadn't wanted to hurt him, or me, but she'd seen Tyler's mother a few months ago, and apparently, she said something that didn't make sense. My mom had always been obsessed with appearances, so instead of asking me directly, she started digging behind my back. That's when she found out Tyler had been married before me. I already knew that. He'd told me when we started dating, but my mom said his first wife had a child, a little girl who passed away when she was only 2. I'd known about that too, but I never knew how. Then my mom said she'd hired someone to look into it. I could barely breathe when she told me. She said the girl hadn't died of an illness like Tyler claimed. The report said the baby had been removed from their care by the state because of neglect and unsafe conditions. I didn't believe it. I refused to. Tyler was gentle, patient, the best father I could imagine. He would never hurt a child, but once that thought entered my mind, it wouldn't leave. When I confronted him that night, he didn't deny it right away. He just sat there, staring at the floor. Then he said the case had been a misunderstanding, that his ex-wife had lied during their divorce to get full custody. He said he'd lost everything over something that wasn't true. I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. But after everything I just learned about my own family, trust didn't mean what it used to. I looked at my son asleep in his room, his little Lightning McQueen Crocs by the door, and felt a panic rise in my chest that I couldn't control. For the first time, I was afraid of the man I loved. That night, after Tyler went to bed, I searched his desk drawers. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Inside one of the folders, I found a letter, old, wrinkled, with an official seal on top. It was from Child Protective Services, and at the bottom, next to a signature I recognized, was a note written in pen. Temporary removal approved. Case to remain sealed by court order. My vision blurred. I dropped the paper on the floor and backed away, because next to that document was something else. A photo. A little girl with dark hair and the same brown eyes as my son. And on the back, written in faded ink, were the words, Tyler Jr., 2015. I couldn't breathe. The photo trembled in my hands, the edges soft from years of being touched. The girl looked so much like my son that for a second I thought it was him. The same round cheeks, the same shy smile. But her eyes? They were older, sadder. Tyler came into the living room rubbing his eyes, half asleep, and froze when he saw the papers spread across the table. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just knew. I held up the photo and asked who she was. He didn't answer right away. He just sat down slowly, put his head in his hands, and let out a long, tired sigh. He said her name was Ava. His daughter, his first child. He told me she hadn't died. Not exactly. She'd been taken away after his ex-wife called the police one night during an argument. He said he'd been drinking, that he was angry, that he'd yelled, but he swore he never touched her or the baby. Still, the cops came. And once the report was filed, everything spiraled. The court gave custody to his ex. He said she moved states and cut him off completely. He tried to fight it, but when the case got sealed, he lost every right to see Ava again. I listened, but something inside me stayed cold. He said he kept that photo because it was the last one he had of her, the only proof she existed. I asked him why he lied about her being dead. His voice cracked when he said he thought it was easier that way, that people looked at him differently when they heard the truth, like he was dangerous, like he didn't deserve another chance. I wanted to feel sorry for him. I really did, but all I could think about was my son asleep down the hall. The way Tyler sometimes raised his voice when he got frustrated. The way his face changed when he lost control for even a second. I'd always told myself it was stress, exhaustion, work, the same excuses I used to make for my parents when they hurt me in quieter ways. Now I wasn't so sure. I told him I needed time to think. He said he understood, but his eyes said otherwise. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. His car wasn't in the driveway. His phone went straight to voicemail. Hours passed. Then my mom called. Again. This time, she wasn't crying. She sounded angry. She said Tyler had shown up at their house, demanding to talk to my dad. She said he was out of control, shouting about lies and secrets, accusing them of turning me against him. I grabbed my keys and drove there as fast as I could. When I arrived, the front door was open. My dad was standing on the porch, arms crossed, his face red. Tyler was in the driveway, pacing, shouting that my family had ruined his life, that they'd destroyed every chance he ever had to be a father. I ran toward him, begging him to stop, to come with me, but he just looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something break. He said, "You think you're any better than them? You're just like your mother. Hiding, judging, pretending you're perfect." Then he got in his car and drove off so fast that gravel hit my legs. My dad muttered that he was never welcome here again, but I didn't care about that. I just stood there in the yard, shaking, watching the dust settle where his car had been. Because the look on his face before he left wasn't anger, it was despair. And for the first time, I felt real fear, not for myself, but for my son. Because if Tyler felt like he had nothing left to lose, what would he do next? When I got home that night, the house was silent, too silent. My first thought was that Tyler had come back, but the car still wasn't in the driveway. The lights were off, the air felt heavy, like the moment right before a storm. I rushed to my son's room and opened the door. He was there, curled up in bed, hugging his worn Lightning McQueen Crocs like a stuffed toy. I didn't even realize I was crying until he opened his eyes and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I wasn't. After he fell asleep again, I went to the kitchen. Tyler's keys were gone from the counter. So was his favorite jacket. But all his other things, his wallet, his phone charger, even his watch, were still there. He hadn't run away. He just left. There was a note on the table, written in his messy handwriting. "I need to clear my head. Don't call me. I'll come back when I can think straight." I sat at that table for a long time, staring at those words. Part of me felt relief. He hadn't taken my son. He wasn't gone forever. But the other part of me couldn't stop replaying what he'd said earlier. "You're just like your mother." Was he right? Had I become so focused on protecting my son that I'd started to repeat her mistakes? Shutting people out? Controlling what I couldn't fix? Choosing silence when I should have asked for help? I didn't want to believe it. But it was hard to ignore the truth when it hurt that much. Over the next few days, I tried to function. Work, errands, school drop-offs. I smiled when I needed to. But inside, I was running on fumes. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach flipped, thinking it might be Tyler. It wasn't. Instead, messages started coming from my mom again. She said she was worried about appearances, that Tyler might say things he shouldn't. It wasn't concern. It was fear. Fear of the truth getting out. And that's when I realized something. All those years, my family hadn't been protecting me. They'd been protecting themselves. The lies weren't just about who my father was. They were about the kind of people my parents really were. How far they'd go to keep the image of a perfect family intact. One afternoon, while looking for an old photo album, I found a stack of letters hidden at the bottom of a box in my closet. They were addressed to me, but never opened, postmarked from years ago. The sender's name made my hands tremble. Mark Ellis. There were at least 10 of them, each one dated years apart. He'd been writing to me my whole life. My mom must have intercepted them. I sat on the floor and read every single one. Some were short, some were full of apologies. He talked about birthdays he missed, milestones he heard about from neighbors, the ache of watching me grow up from a distance. In one letter, he wrote, "If you ever feel like you don't belong where you are, it's because the truth was kept from you, not because you did something wrong." I broke down right there, surrounded by paper and memories that were never supposed to reach me. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I just felt free. Because the truth wasn't a punishment anymore. It was a release. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop waiting for the people who hurt me to make it right. Maybe it was time to build something new. Just me and my son. But that night, as I was putting the letters away, my phone finally buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in days. Tyler. His message was short. "I know what your mom did. We need to talk. Now." When I saw Tyler's name on my phone, my heart started pounding so hard I could barely breathe. For a moment, I just stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I called him. He picked up on the first ring. His voice sounded tired, raw, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked if our son was safe. I said yes. He let out a shaky breath and told me to meet him at the old park near the lake. That park used to be our escape. Before things got messy, we'd go there on Sundays and let our boy feed the ducks while we sat on the bench, pretending life was simple. When I got there, Tyler was sitting in the car, engine off, staring at the water. He looked older, like the last week had taken years from him. He didn't waste time. He said he'd gone to my mom's house again after our fight. He wanted answers. Said he needed her to stop interfering, to stop digging into his past. But instead, she'd told him something that changed everything. I asked what it was. He hesitated, then looked at me with this haunted expression I'd never seen before. "She said your mom wasn't just trying to keep you from your real father," he said. "She was trying to keep him from all of you." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He told me my mom and Mark had made a deal years ago, one that went wrong. Apparently, when she got pregnant, Mark offered to leave his wife, to start over. But my mom refused. She said she'd lose everything, her reputation, her marriage, her perfect life. So they made a quiet agreement. Mark would keep his distance and my mom would make sure he never told anyone. But my dad eventually found out. Not just about the affair, about something else. Tyler said my dad knew Mark wasn't only my biological father, he was connected to our family in another way. He reached into his jacket and handed me an old photo. It looked like it had been ripped in half. On one side was my mother, smiling, much younger. On the other side, Mark. His arm was around her shoulders, and behind them, there was a house. My stomach dropped when I recognized it. It was our house. The same front porch, the same yard. The photo was taken before I was born. Tyler said my mom had confessed that Mark helped buy that house, that she used his money to cover the down payment. She'd always told everyone it came from my dad's inheritance. Another lie. He said my mom was terrified that the truth would come out, not because of me, but because if my dad ever found proof, he'd lose everything too. The house, the business, the illusion of the perfect family. It was all built on a lie. I didn't even know what to say. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My whole life, every fight, every cold look, every, "You should be grateful for what we've done for you," all of it was tied to money that came from the man they swore to erase. Tyler said my mom broke down when she told him that she'd been getting letters from Mark again lately, the same ones I'd found in my closet. But instead of giving them to me, she burned most of them. She was terrified he'd expose her. I realized then that she hadn't just been lying out of shame, she'd been lying out of fear. Tyler looked at me and said, "You know she's not done, right? She's going to try to bury this again. She always does." He wasn't wrong. I looked out at the lake and said, "Then maybe it's time I stop letting her." He nodded slowly. "If you do this, Emily, you'll lose them for good." I took a deep breath. Then maybe it's about time I stopped pretending they were ever mine to lose. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. The air was cold, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel scared. I felt clear. That night, after I put my son to bed, I went to my closet and pulled out every letter Mark had ever sent me. I spread them across the floor and took pictures of each one. Every word, every date, every truth my mother had tried to erase. And then, I sent them to the entire family group chat. No caption, no explanation, just proof. I knew it would burn everything down, but maybe some things needed to. Because sometimes the only way to rebuild a family is to let the old one finally fall apart. I didn't sleep after sending those photos. The moment I hit send, I felt this rush of panic, followed by a strange kind of calm, like a wound that finally stopped bleeding. At first, there was silence. No one replied. Not my mom, not my dad, not even Jason. Then, around 2 a.m., my phone started buzzing nonstop, missed calls. Voicemails. Dozens of messages flooding in. Most were from Jason, accusing me of being vindictive, of humiliating Mom in front of the whole family. He said I'd destroyed their reputation. I almost laughed when I read that. Destroyed it? It had been rotting for decades. I just pulled back the curtain. By morning, my mom finally texted. All she wrote was, "I'm coming over." My stomach dropped. I didn't answer. An hour later, she was at my door. No makeup, no perfect smile, just exhaustion. She looked older, smaller, like someone who'd spent her whole life holding up a mask that finally cracked. I didn't invite her in, but she stepped inside anyway. For a while, we just stood there. She looked around, her eyes landing on the stack of Mark's letters still sitting on the counter. She whispered, "You weren't supposed to see those." I told her I was done living with secrets, that my son deserved better, that I deserved better. She started crying, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, defeated kind. She said everything she did was to protect me, to keep the family together. I asked her if she ever thought about what that cost me. She looked up, her face red and wet, and said, "Every day." Then she told me something I didn't expect. She said my dad had known about Mark long before I was born, that he'd agreed to raise me because he couldn't have children of his own. Jason was adopted. I wasn't supposed to know that. I felt dizzy. All those years of blood matters and real grandkids, all those words that tore me apart, and the whole time, none of it had even been true. She said my dad grew to resent me, not because of who my father was, but because I was living proof of what he couldn't give her. That sentence broke something inside me. I told her I could forgive the lies, maybe even the affair, but not the way she made my son feel less than. Not the way she let a child carry the weight of her own guilt. She reached out like she wanted to touch my hand, but I stepped back. She nodded, like she knew this was it, the real end. Before she left, she said quietly, "You're stronger than I ever was." I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind her and leaned against it, shaking. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's daughter. I just felt like me. Later that night, Jason called again, saying Mom was heartbroken, that I should apologize. I told him no, that sometimes the only way to heal is to stop pretending everything's fine. He said I was selfish. I said I finally learned it from the best. Then I hung up. After that, I sat with my son on the couch. He was wearing his Lightning McQueen Crocs, swinging his legs, asking if Grandma was still mad. I told him she just needed time. He nodded, then leaned on my arm and said, "That's okay. We don't need her to be happy." And somehow, that one sentence felt like a lifetime of healing. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. But a few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Again. Inside was a small photo of my mom and Mark, and on the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were the words, "You still don't know everything." The letter sat on my kitchen table for hours before I opened it. After everything that had happened, part of me didn't want to know. I just wanted silence. But silence never lasts long in my family. I finally unfolded the photo, the same one I'd seen before of my mom and Mark, young and smiling. But this time, there was something different, a small note tucked inside the envelope. It wasn't from Mark. It wasn't from my mom. It was from my dad. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. The note said, "Emily, if you're reading this, then your mother didn't destroy it like she wanted to. I know the truth has probably reached you by now. You deserve to hear my side too." My chest tightened as I kept reading. He wrote that he'd known about Mark long before I was born, not because my mom confessed, but because Mark had told him. He said he'd felt humiliated, angry, betrayed, but when he saw me for the first time, something shifted. "I thought I could never love you," he wrote, "but I was wrong. You were just a baby, and you looked at me like I was your whole world. I wasn't your blood, but I was your father from that moment on." He said he'd tried to forgive my mom, but every time he looked at her, he saw the man she'd chosen instead of him. And every time he looked at me, he saw both, the mistake and the miracle. "I let that confusion turn into distance," he wrote. "And I'm sorry for every time you felt unloved. You didn't do anything wrong. I did." By the time I finished reading, I couldn't stop crying. For years, I'd carried the weight of their silence, their cold stares, their impossible expectations, thinking I'd done something to deserve it. But it was never about me. It was about the ghosts they never faced. The letter ended with one last line: "You don't have to fix what we broke. Just love your boy the way I wish I had loved you, without fear." I pressed the paper to my chest and cried until it blurred in my hands. That night, I went outside and sat on the porch while my son chased fireflies in the yard, his little red Lightning McQueen Crocs lighting up with every step. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be part of a family that only existed in photographs, all the times I'd swallowed my voice to keep the peace, and for the first time I realized I didn't need any of that anymore. My family wasn't defined by last names, or DNA, or the approval of people who couldn't love me right. It was defined by the small things: the laughter that filled my kitchen when my son told his silly jokes, the mornings we made pancakes from scratch, the nights we fell asleep on the couch watching cartoons. That was real. That was ours. The next morning, I called my mom. Not to fight, just to tell her I'd read Dad's letter. She cried quietly and said, "He always meant to give it to you, but he never found the right moment." I told her it's okay, that the right moment finally came, even if it was too late for him. She asked if she could see us sometime, maybe take my son to the park. I hesitated, but then I said yes, not for her, but for me. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means letting go of the weight. Later that afternoon, I watched my son run ahead of me, laughing, his Crocs flashing in the sunlight, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I just felt whole.